Hello, and welcome to Your Vote Counts. I'm Bernadine Anderson from the League of Women Voters, bringing you this public, nonpartisan voter service program today. These 2020 general election interviews are made possible by Capital Community Media via remote technology and in collaboration with the Leagues of Women Voters of Oregon and Marion and Polk counties. For this race, all candidates were invited. Candidates did not receive the questions ahead of time, and those questions were developed by League of Women Voters, American Association of University Women, and Neighborhood Association. Candidates were asked to prepare a 3-minute opening statement telling us about themselves, their qualifications, and their vision for the office if they're elected. Today, we have the opportunity to talk to House District 23 candidate, Alex Polikoff, and we'd now like to hear from him with his opening remarks. Mr. Polikoff?
Well, thanks so much for the opportunity to participate. So why am I running? Well, I really believe that we can do better in Oregon. We have a healthcare crisis, which the COVID pandemic has only really pointed out how inequitable our healthcare system is right now. We can do better. We don't need to have hundreds of Oregonians die every year for lack of health care. We have the third highest out-of-pocket expenses in the country. So even those who have health care have out-of-sight premiums and deductibles to have to deal with. We have a housing crisis, which has only been made worse by the devastating and historic wildfires in the state. So we have a problem with unaffordability as well as housing the homeless. We also have, speaking of the wildfires, we also have a climate crisis. So we have to respond both as a state, as a country. We have to pull together in order to address that. And another thing I feel strongly about, we have a crisis going on right now in our democracy. Here in Oregon, we actually spend more per capita on state legislative races than anywhere else in the country. And that's because of pretty much non-existent campaign contribution limits. So I have a platform to deal with all these things. Just for example, we have a measure coming up, Measure 107, which would establish in the Constitution the ability to put limits on campaign contributions. I would like to see public financing, but failing that, we at least need to limit the amount of money in politics. And basically that degrading factor that money contributes to our democracy and political system. Why am I qualified? Right now, I'm serving as an elected director of the Corvallis Rural Fire Protection District. So I have some experience with setting policies and budgets. I personally have felt very strongly about serving in my community. That's an unpaid office right now as the board member. I've also served as a volunteer firefighter, as a mentor for youth at risk in a local youth shelter. Also as a CASA advocate for neglected and abused children. And I've been doing that for over 20 years now. So I believe in serving your community. I'm recently retired as an electrical engineer. Actually, I was a power system engineer for over 20 years. So I think I have some experience as far as addressing how to get us over to a renewable energy versus fossil fuels. So, I mean, all these things I think is in my background that allow me to, if elected, if lucky enough to be elected, to try and serve my district and the state as a whole.
Thank you very much. You've touched on many of the areas that you'll get a chance to expand in our questions today. Our first question, you mentioned budget. So passing a balanced budget, considering all the events that have occurred, will be a big task. What will be your guiding principles as you tackle these budgetary choices?
Well, as a state, we're mandated to operate with a balanced budget. So we have to, in order to not reduce our services, and we need a lot of services. I'll talk about healthcare, but in order to not reduce our services, we need a corresponding increase in income. So one thing I would like to emphasize is making corporations pay their fair share. We have corporations are paying the lowest level of their contributions to the state revenues for an extremely long time. So personal income has been increasing over the years, and corporate income has been decreasing. So one of my priorities will be to make sure that corporations pay their fair share, including addressing the fact that corporations can be very large, employ thousands here, but as long as their sales are out of state, pay little or no income tax. So that really needs to be addressed. So that would be my primary focus. We'll talk about healthcare. I think we're already spending the dollars in order to get better healthcare that we can apply to all Oregonians. But in making corporations pay their fair share and getting rid of the kicker would be priorities for me as far as budgeting goes.
Thank you. What steps can be put into place to create an infrastructure that might be more resilient to fires, floods, seismic, health, and political disasters that occur? What should we do about our infrastructure?
As far as paying for it, or
any aspect you wish to
more?
Explore, whichever.
Well, sure. Well, one thing we can do is have, again, if we don't have the money, how can we get the infrastructure? So again, we need to have our revenues match our ability to pay for more infrastructure. So I've already mentioned, having corporations pay more of their fair share. I mean, another thing we can do is, and it's been something I've advocated for years and years now, is establishing an Oregon State Bank. If we had a state bank, we're already paying hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, all the banks that crashed our financial system. We need to keep that money here in Oregon. And if we do that, what we can use that money for, besides things like education, that part of our infrastructure, is things like promoting public housing projects or supporting businesses that are in danger of going out of business by giving them low-cost loans that the state could finance instead of having them look for private banks to do that. So those are the things that I would key on.
Okay, and you mentioned housing and homelessness, so let's explore that a little bit. What plans should be in place to address homelessness due to things like COVID, evictions, homes lost to fire? What would you like to see happen?
Well, where possible, I would like to see, at least a moratorium on evictions and some form of rent control to keep people in their house if they can, to make it through all these crises. So, but as far as having more housing available, I would be a supporter of zoning things like zoning for medium or higher density to allow more housing units built, as well as ADUs or accessory dwelling units. So for people who don't need large houses, which soak up a lot of resources, that's another solution. So, I mean, there's others. I don't pretend to be an expert on that question, but again, I think zoning and infrastructure, money for infrastructure, specifically for public housing or low-income housing, and again, an Oregon State Bank could help in that field.
Thank you. What do you think the future of forest care will look like with all of our experiences with the fires of 2020? Think of things like thinning, replanting, roads, access, all those elements.
Well, I think we need to have responsible forest management, obviously, and we need to cultivate the forests in order to make them more resilient for fires. But, it doesn't help to break rake the bottom of the forest like our great president recommends. We just have to have responsible forest management as far as thinning and so on. And we also have to address the climate crisis. I mean, why is that we had the worst fires ever in our whole state's history, and we've had just continued warming over these years, and making trees, this warming and climate change is making trees more susceptible to insects and disease. So we're just going to see this increase in time. Now, again, this is something that's both state and nationwide and planetary. So it's not like we can fix climate change just within Oregon, but we can certainly do our part.
Thank you. I'm going to pick up on your topic of climate change and ask you if you know and understand the proposed cap and reduce idea that's being suggested, and what other recommendations would you have for our state to address climate change and greenhouse gas emissions?
Well, I mean, one thing we need to do is, transportation makes up like about 40% of our contributions to greenhouse gases. So we need to address that, and one way to address that would be for more electric vehicle and electric transportation infrastructure. So again, we need to spend more on infrastructure, which a Green New Deal that everybody's talking about would address. We also need to get away from burning fossil fuels at power plants. So my goal would be to convert completely to 100% renewable energy, either hydro, solar, and wind, as soon as possible, 2025 if possible. But we need to get there. We need to get there sooner or later, and we have a crisis going on, so the sooner the better. So I think we can also, efficiency is something that's not really recognized a whole lot. We have good, our Oregon Energy Trust kind of addresses some of those concerns and making homes more resilient and more efficient as far as energy usage. But that's something you get a lot of return, a lot of bang for the buck with not a lot of outlay. So efficiency, and conversion to renewable energy and the infrastructure to support it, would be my main priorities.
Thank you. Let's consider the situation with education. And what are some major ideas that you have concerning K-12 education's return to services?
Well, my concerns with education overall is that they are not getting the support they need. My wife was a school district employee until recently. She retired as well. And just from my experience of seeing what they're dealing with there, they're just looking at increased classroom sizes and budgets cuts, so that things that we ordinarily would see and support, like PE and arts and civics, that's all being shoved to the side. And it seems like the emphasis is always on standardized testing or core testing now, instead of teaching critical thinking. So that would be a priority for me, to maintain K-12 as well. And we have to think about beyond that. College is almost unaffordable now, and it's crazy. Even with state schools, a lot of people can't afford to go. I think ideally we should have free public tuition for our state schools for residents. So I would like to see that at least at the community college level, and then expand that to our whole state system. So again, we do need revenue to offset that. So, but we've been traditionally and of late a low tax but low service state. So we need to increase that revenue to get the services that we need and pave the way for the future, because the children are our future. We can't shortchange them. They're the ones who are going to build our society. So,
Thank you. And in discussion of building and working together, do you have strategies to address congressional legislative sides working together to bring together a more bicameral, bipartisan legislative decisions?
By Congress, I assume you mean the state legislature, correct? Not U.S.
Yes,
Congress.
sorry.
Okay. You had me there. Well, I ran for Congress once, so that, but I didn't get elected, so so I can't address Congress, but I can address the state legislature. So we've seen a big partisan divide. Well, I'm not a Democrat or Republican. So, and here's the thing. The largest party now is not Democrat or Republican. The largest party is non-affiliated or affiliated with independents. So, we really should have a legislature that looks like Oregon. And right now, it's completely split between Democrats and Republicans, and there are no third party or independent representation. So I think, as a third party, I would not be beholden to either the Democrat or the Republican line. And what I would try and do is just represent the members of my district to get things that they really care about through, such as universal health care, where they don't have to worry about choosing between, utilities, rent, and food versus health care. So I think it's time to elect somebody, to elect a third party member to the state legislature.
Thank you. And our last question for today, you've mentioned some major areas that are of interest to you. Are there others? And with those in mind, what committees would you like to serve on in the legislature?
Well, as you've already surmised, my biggest thing is getting universal health care, equitable, affordable, accessible health care for all Oregonians, including rural areas that are underserved right now. So, I would definitely want to be on the healthcare committee. And, I've been an advocate for years and years with my local Mid-Valley Healthcare Advocates, is the Lynn Benton organization advocating for statewide publicly funded healthcare for Oregonians, and also healthcare for all Oregon. It's a statewide organization trying to get that. So we'll get there. It's just we need to get there sooner rather than later. So there's that. Another thing I feel strongly about as far as democracy goes, I mentioned campaign finance reform. I would like to see ranked choice voting applied statewide. I was part of the people that spearheaded that effort in Benton County. So we now have, this will be the first election anywhere in the state where we'll have ranked choice voting. So besides campaign finance reform, election reform is important to me. And I think Oregonians deserve to be able to vote their conscience and be able to vote who they want and have that person be elected by the majority of their constituents, not have the vote split. So those are two areas I feel strongly about. I also, feel strongly about right now that our liberties need to be preserved. So I'm in favor of, demilitarization of the police, stop giving them leftover weapons from our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And also, I believe that, use of surveillance techniques should be curtailed as far as our those techniques that infringe on Oregonians' rights, as well as federal officers and agents that are kind of abrogate our constitutional rights. That should not happen, and we should actually arrest and charge officers who are doing that. So all these areas are areas I would feel strongly about and would want to participate in committees in the legislature on. But again, healthcare that's if I could get that passed, that would be worth it all to me, just right there.
Thank you very much. So thank you, candidate Polikoff, for the interview today, sharing your time and your thoughts. It's much appreciated.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to participate. I appreciate it.
Thanks also to Capital Community Media for their time and making it available across the state through YouTube and Vote 411. Thank you to the several leagues of women voters, AUW, Salem City Club, for being interviewers and for suggesting questions. And thanks to you, the public, for watching your vote count in order to become a more informed voter. For more voter information, including dates, registration, candidates for state and local areas, and ballot measure information, please go online to vote411.org. You have until October 13th to register to vote or to make address changes. Ballots will be mailed out beginning October 14th. And that very special day, November 3rd, is our election day. Please remember that postmarks don't count. Elections matter and they make a difference in our lives. So please remember to vote and encourage others to do the same, because your vote counts.